Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Racha, Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Nehemiah chapter 13. And, as we went through in the 12th chapter, right, we covered the dedication of the wall, right? You had Nehemiah, gathered the Levites, right, and the singers and so on upon the wall, and to celebrate the dedication of the wall. So in Nehemiah 13, as we're going to go through, Nehemiah basically recaps a couple of the things that he addressed when he came to Jerusalem. Some of the wickedness that was going on in the land prior to the Lord having him come over and set things in order, right? And keeping in mind, right, that Nehemiah was a governor. So he was a man of power, a man of authority. And though he had the spirit of a prophet, right, but he wasn't like doing necessarily what Isaiah was doing, right? For example, going out there and prophesying directly to people, okay? And such was the case, right? You had certain men who were prophets in one life, right? But in another life, they played a role, right? Maybe they were a governor or a president or something like that, in that lifetime. But it doesn't mean, like, you take Ezra, for example, or Daniel, in the positions that they were in, not directly out there prophesying to people per se, but they did have a lot of prophetic revelations, right? Like visions and dreams and messages given by the Lord through the angels to them, and pertaining to things that would happen in the future, in which they then had recorded and we have today. But coming back to Nehemiah, right, and continuing here, this is Nehemiah chapter 13, verse 1. On that day, they read in the book of Moses in the audience of the people, and therein was found written that the Ammonite and the Moabite should not come into the congregation of God forever, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them. And this was done by Balak, right, in the book of Numbers, which I think they've referenced over here, right? Numbers 22 and 1 all the way to Numbers 24 and 25. And you can read about this, if you're not already familiar with it, you can read about it, when you have the chance there. So it says here, right, but hired Balaam against them, that he should curse them, because the Moabites feared Israel as we were coming up into the land. And so they tried to curse us. Howbeit, our God turned the curse into a blessing. Now, real quick, a reference to this here, going to the book of Deuteronomy 23 and 3, it reads, and an Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord Yahweh. Even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord Yahweh forever, because they met you not. And so, the way this is worded, it could be that though it says 10th, that's probably like in this sense, still saying it's probably like an exaggeration of the time to say that, even up until the 10th generation, they're still not, kind of like allowed to come into this congregation. And why? Verse 4, because they met you not. And the reason I'm saying this is because from the time of this Deuteronomy up until the time of Nehemiah is more than 10 generations. And so when we're reading in the book of Nehemiah 13, after they read about this, we'll see what they ended up doing. But if this was literal in the 10th generation, then it wouldn't matter in the time of Nehemiah, right? Like as much as it did, right? To say, hey, you gotta get them up out of here, because then they would say, oh, it's already been 10 generations, right? The Lord set up or it's written in the book of Deuteronomy that they shall not enter even to the 10th generation. Well, it's been past 10 generations, so it's okay, that kind of stuff. So I think it's more emphasis down here on forever. Anyway, verse 4, because they met you not with bread and with water in the way, meaning in the path, right, as we were coming up, when ye came forth out of Egypt, and because they hired against thee Balaam, the son of Beor of Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse thee. And I believe when you go into the word Mesopotamia here, it's somewhere, I think it's like Aram something. And I believe Balaam was from around that region, not like deep Mesopotamia, but like around Syria. Let me see if I click on his name. What can we get? Balaam. Balaam. It says here, not of the people, the son of Beor, a man endowed with the gift of prophecy, a town in Manasseh. Now, okay, what we can do here is just look up Balaam. Okay, let's see if it tells us where he was. I think it does somewhere in here. And if I can't find it, it is what it is. You know, you can look it up. It's not that important where he's from. Cool. That's about enough searching on that. Anyway, so Balak hired Balaam to try to curse us, as we're reading here. Nevertheless, the Lord Yahweh thy God would not hearken unto Balaam. But the Lord Yahweh thy God turned the curse into a blessing unto thee, because the Lord thy God loved thee. Thou shalt not seek their peace nor their prosperity at all, or all thy days forever. So this is explicitly written in here. And this is what they were reading here in the book of Nehemiah 13. And after they had read it, right, in verse 1, verse 2, it says, because they met not the children of Israel with bread and with water, but hired Balaam against them, that he should curse them. Howbeit our God turned the curse into a blessing. Now it came to pass, when they had heard the law, that they separated from Israel all the mixed multitude. And when you go into the book of Ezra, not first or second Esdras, but Ezra, you'll read about how when Ezra came there, he saw how the people had been defiled and the seed had been mingled, meaning that the men of Israel were marrying the women of the heathen around, and which included Ammonites and Moabites, and the women were also marrying the men as well. So there was this intermingling over here, as where you have this mixed multitude here. So as it says, they separated them. Verse 4, and before this, Eliashib the priest, having the oversight of the chamber of the house of our God, so he was like in charge of, as it says, the chamber in the temple, was allied unto Tobiah. Now I believe Tobiah was an Ammonite, and he had, and let's look up the word allied here and see. We know what it means, but I want to know if it has any further definitions. All right. Warawab. It says near, of place, of time, of personal relationship, kinship. But obviously we know they weren't related by blood, right, or by nationality. Two different nations here. So nonetheless, they were allied. Verse 5, and he had prepared for him a great chamber, where aforetime they laid the meat offerings, the frankincense and the vessels, and the tithes of the corn, the new wine and the oil, which was commanded to be given to the Levites and the singers and the porters, and the offerings of the priests. So Eliashib had given Tobiah, an Ammonite, one of the rooms in the temple, where that room was used to hold the meat offerings, the frankincense, all those things, which would then be distributed amongst the Levites, the singers, the porters. We went into the different roles of them in the different families in the last lesson, right? So instead of using it for what it was supposed to do, he went and gave this as a room to this guy, Tobiah. But in all this time was not I at Jerusalem. Yeah, because if Nehemiah was there, he certainly would not have stood for that. So this was all happening while he was in Persia. It says here, for in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon. This is still talking about Artaxerxes the first, Longimanus, which means long-handed. Let's see, Xerxes the first, son of Xerxes. And they did have rule. Their empire also consisted of Babylon, so that's why it's being mentioned here. But I want to look up something here and see. Yeah, so you'll notice like some of the titles that they went by. I think in particular, when you go back in history to like Cyrus, you'll have King of Kings, right? And then they'll have like King of Babylon, King of Assyria, King of this, King of that, because these were like major regions that were under their dominion. So coming back here, this is dealing with this guy, Artaxerxes the first, which we read about in Nehemiah, I believe the early chapters, maybe 1, 2, or 3. Anyway, as Nehemiah says, for in the 32nd year, the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, came I unto the king, and after certain days obtained I leave of the king. And we read that in Nehemiah 1, 2, and 3. And I came to Jerusalem and understood of the evil that Eliashib did for Tobiah in preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. And it's written in the law explicitly, not in Deuteronomy, we just read it. And it grieved me sore. So Nehemiah was very unhappy about that. Therefore I cast forth all the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber. So he had them remove that. Throw that shit. Man, get that thing out of here. This dirty ass, man, shit. Then I commanded, and they cleansed the chambers, and thither brought I again the vessels of the house of God, with the meat offering and the frankincense. So the things that were supposed to be in there, he put them back in there. And this is why the Lord had Nehemiah in that position, right? Because now, yeah, okay, Eliashib was a priest, but Nehemiah was the governor. So he, being that Judah was a province under the Persian Empire, and Nehemiah, being the cupbearer to the king of the Persian Empire, had jurisdiction as the governor over that region. So think of it like how, yes, even in the New Testament, we had the Sanhedrin, we had the high priest and all that, but they were still subject to the governors, right? Or the procurators. So you had like, that's why they took Yahushua to Pontius Pilate. They couldn't execute judgment upon him themselves, especially when it was like a capital punishment. So regardless of that role, he still had that lordship over them. So in this case, Nehemiah had that authority, and that's a perfect position the Lord put him in, because then he could challenge these wicked things that the rulers of our people at this time were doing. Like this, case in point. Verse 10, and I perceived that the portions of the Levites had not been given them. For the Levites and the singers that did the work were fled every one to his field. So the Levites that were doing the services, they weren't getting the tithe. Remember, a tithe, a tenth, was supposed to go to the Levites. But here it is, it wasn't being honored. So they all went to their fields, left this, doing off this work so they can do what they got to do. Verse 11, then contended I with the rulers. So he was going back and forth with them, letting them have it. Like, what's been going on all these years? What's been going on this whole time? Why is this Ammonite in the temple? Why what's happened to the Levites? Why are they not getting their portions? Like, what the hell is happening here? And said, why is the house of God forsaken? And I gathered them together and set them in their place. Then brought all Judah the tithe of the corn, which is a tenth, of the corn and the new wine and the oil onto the treasuries. So now he set that ordinance back in place. So when they would have their first fruits, they would bring a tenth of that into the treasuries, and that would then be distributed amongst the Levites. And I made treasurers over the treasuries Shelemiah the priest, and Zadok the scribe, and of the Levites Pedaiah, and next unto them was Hanan the son of Zaccur, the son of Mattaniah. For they were counted faithful, and their office was to distribute unto their brethren. Remember me, O my God, concerning this, and wipe not out my good deeds that I have done for the house of my God, and for the offices thereof. Verse 15, in those days saw I. Now, what we're reading of here in Nehemiah 13 is not a one-day thing. He's not saying all this happened in one day. He's recounting the things that he had to do, the things that he saw, the things that were wrong throughout all the years that he spent after he had come to Jerusalem, that he ended up fixing. So that's why it's saying here, for example, in those days, right? In those days, in these times when I came here, man, this was happening. Then I found out that they were doing this, and this was, it was crazy. It was a mess. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath. Treading the wine press is, if you have, for example, look this up, wine press, give you a little image, say Bible. It was like almost like a pit, right? And then you would have the grapes in there. Okay, so here's a good example, good depiction. So you have the grapes in there, and then treading means to stomp or walk on. So they would tread the wine press. They would have the grapes in there. They would stomp on it, stomp on it, stomp on it to squash it and get the blood of the grapes, and that would flow into another part in here, and then they would be able to get that and turn that into like wine and whatnot. This was a laborsome task, and according to the law, this is not something that they should have been doing on the Sabbath. So that's why he mentions he saw them treading wine presses on the Sabbath, bringing in sheaves. Sheaves are when you, let's get another visual of that. Sheaves, Bible. When you reap, right, during the harvest, you reap, you gather they're like, I have to show you an image like this. There you go. So you see how you have like the grain and whatnot. There you go. They would be bundled up, and each bundle was called a sheaf. Okay, so these are the sheaves that would then be treaded upon or beat to get the grains out of them, and then the grains would then be grinded into flour, which could be used for bread and cake and whatever else they wanted to use it for. So he sees them. There's some treading the wine press on the Sabbath, bringing in sheaves and leading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. What do you think they brought it there for? To sell. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. Yeah, because when he saw them bringing in the grapes, the figs, the sheaves, the this, the that, to sell it on the Sabbath, it is against the law to buy and sell on the Sabbath. So he's like, what the, like what, man? So as he said, I testified against them, right, to put an end to it. Verse 16, there dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. Now there was a famous place known as Maktesh, and let me actually pull that up real quick. And it's mentioned, I think, in Zephaniah, but it was like a merchant area, like a gathering, where you would have merchants come of all different areas, and they would, sell, right? Bring new things from overseas and all that, and sell them. So like a trade area. And you can see here, it says Maktesh, a mortar or deep hollow, a hollow or valley, evidently in the greater Jerusalem area. So this is like a marketplace, like a city, like a place there they would come and they would trade, right? Now, if we look in here in the Bibles section, the dictionaries section, And we can use the Eastons. And let's look for the word Maktesh. Here we are. Right, so it says a place in or near Jerusalem inhabited by silver merchants. It has been conjectured that it was the Phoenician quarter of the city, where the traders of that nation resided after the Oriental custom. But why did they do that? And who are traders? People that come, merchants, they buy, they sell, and so on. I'm not saying this is where they were, right? Because they would just bring these things and sell them in general in the public area, right? But it just reminded me of how you had certain areas in and around Jerusalem that were just like dedicated and known. Okay, if you wanted to go and trade or get some exotic stuff that weren't, found in the region or in the land, you would have to go there because people would bring them from other parts of the world. So verse 17. Then, I also wanted to let's go here. See if I can find it. Might be in Deuteronomy. Let's see. Remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. All right, it might be here in Deuteronomy 20, Exodus. Let's see, by. So yeah, I can't find it right now, but it's in there, right? So they were going off doing that, and so that's why Nehemiah testified against them. And then in verse 17, then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, what evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Because they clearly were allowing it. This had been going on. You have to imagine this had been going on for some time prior to Nehemiah coming in to Jerusalem and witnessing this. So he's like, what are you guys doing? What? And keep in mind, we had just come, and he's going to mention this. We had just come out of captivity. Right, verse 18, did not your fathers thus? Didn't our forefathers do the same thing? And did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? He allowed them to destroy the temple, destroy the city, destroy the walls, burn everything down. The same things we've not just now rebuilt it, and you're doing the same shit that got us in this position in the first place. So as he says, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, so he said, okay, now going forth, tonight, the Sabbath comes in tonight, as the sun starts to go down, I commanded that the gates should be shut, close it, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. The burden going into like we read up above, the sheaves, the oil, the wine, the grapes, and all of those that they would place on the asses and bring them into the city and sell them. No more. He said the Sabbath comes in tonight till tomorrow night, the gates are shut. It's not open until after the Sabbath. So nobody is able to come in and bring things to sell them. We're not playing that. Verse 20, so the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. So because they couldn't come in, they would be outside the gates, waiting. Verse 21, then I testified against them and said unto them, why lodge ye about the wall? If ye do so again, I will lay hands on you. So he gave them a nice warning. Don't be waiting out here on the Sabbath trying to sell things. If I catch you here again, it's on sight for you. From that time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. So now you see why it was important. It was needful for the Lord to have Nehemiah in this position, because He had the authority to be able to dish out these threats and these orders. If he was just a regular man, how would he be able to contend with the nobles and the priests and all that? He wouldn't have power. He wouldn't have authority. He wouldn't be able to do that. Though he would have the right heart and the right mind, it wouldn't be backed by, the necessary, authorization, right, for lack of a better word, to put it into action. Verse 22, and I commanded the Levites that they should cleanse themselves, and that they should come and keep the gates and sanctify the Sabbath day. Remember me, O my God, concerning this also, and spare me according to the greatness of thy mercy. Verse 23, in those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab. So these once again of the heathen nations round about, and they had married them, which was off. You weren't supposed to marry them. Let's look up Ashdod. It says wow, blue letter, very, very insightful. Ashdod. Yeah, so you can see it's somewhere here, with what would be considered like a Philistine territory and so on. So continuing, so they married these strange wives and had children with them, and their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language. Damn, so they couldn't even speak the Hebrew, but they could speak the language of their mother's side, you could say, right? It says, but according to the language of each people. And I contended with them and cursed them and smote certain of them. So you can imagine the sight of what was going on here. Nehemiah was very, very upset at this, right? And smote certain of them, to smite meaning physically lay hands on them, and plucked off their hair and made them swear by God, saying, ye shall not give your daughters unto their sons, nor take their daughters unto your sons, or for yourselves. Did not Solomon king of Israel sin by these things? Yet among many nations there was no king like him. So what happened to King Solomon? He ended up having all these women, right? 1,000 women. I think it was 300 wives and 700 concubines. I think that was the number there. Or it might have been flipped, but I think it was that. But in his old age, his wives or his women ended up leading him astray. Then he set up the idols and built, altars for their gods and so on. So he's saying, King Solomon, the same thing you're doing here is what led him astray, marrying the heathen women. Okay. Yet among many nations, there was no king like him, who was beloved of his God, and God made him king over all Israel. So he's saying a man as great as King Solomon, right, in the position and the wisdom and knowledge he had, even he was not immune to this, right? Nevertheless, even him did outlandish women cause to sin. Shall we then hearken unto you to do all this great evil, to transgress against our God in marrying strange wives? So even King Solomon wasn't able to resist that. And we're supposed to be okay with, watching, you got this, it's different with you. Yeah, no. And one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest, was son-in-law to Sanballat the Horonite. Therefore I chased him from me. Now, yeah, so this guy Eliashib, man, here it is, the high priest. And look at what he was doing, because not only did he have, he had given a room in the temple to Tobiah because he was in league with him, but then he was even the high priest, his son Joiada had married the daughter of Sanballat, which was a Moabite. So he gave his son to a Moabite, and he should know better. Now what I want to do is I want to read this in the NLT. So in the NLT, it says, one of the sons of Joiada, son of Eliashib, right, one of the sons of Joiada, so Shalakia, not Joiada being the son of Eliashib, but it was one of the sons of Joiada, the son of Eliashib. So it doesn't say that the exact name of this man. All right, hold on. NLT says, one of the sons of Joiada, son of Eliashib, the high priest, had married a daughter of Sanballat the Horonite, so I banished him from my presence. Okay, so now it's clear. Salakia. Joiada, son of Eliashib, gave one of his sons to marry the daughter of Sanballat. Okay, and that kind of makes sense here. It says here, one of the sons of Jehoiada, the son of Eliashib, the high priest. So, and in this case, Eliashib's grandson, okay, was then the one who married this Moabite. But in any case, it says here, so I banished him from my presence. So Nehemiah said, yo, don't even show your face around me. Remember them, oh my God, because they have defiled the priesthood and the covenant of the priesthood and of the Levites. So there was a lot of wickedness going on in the land continually. Thus cleansed I them from all strangers, and appointed the wards of the priests and the Levites, everyone in his business. So Nehemiah put them back in order, put them back in their rotation, in the roles that they were to do, what they were assigned to do after ousting this wickedness during his time. But unfortunately, after the time of Nehemiah, right, he would only be there for so long. Eventually he would go to the spirit world, and then what do you think would happen? Same as in the book of Judges. They would go right back to their wickedness. Verse 31, and the wood offering at times appointed, and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. And this is also an example as to why the Lord had that the new covenant, just say, right, the new covenant be put in place, right, in terms of, like, you know, let's just say he wrote up a new contract, right? Because the whole entire history we're reading here is showing you why there was a need for the new covenant. Because regardless of what you would do, you know, the Jake would just continue to go off. Okay. So anyway, this brings us to the end of the book of Nehemiah. And, you know, Lord willing, that was edifying and gave you some context as to, you know, what's happening around this time, who were his contemporaries, you know, and this is sort of like the post, as they call it, the post-exilic, right, or the post-exile period, right, where we had come from, you know, Babylonian captivity. Though you had the Persians in rule right now, the Lord had put the Spirit on them to allow us to go back to Jerusalem, to rebuild the temple, to rebuild, you know, the walls, as we just read of here, and to set things back in order. So with that, Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.